Welcome to Banfield. Whoopi Goldberg is back, but which Whoopi is it? The comedian made her first appearance on The View today since completing a 2-week suspension for making comments about race and the Holocaust that her network considered hurtful. Ironically, though, that suspension became an even bigger deal than her controversial comments. Some people said a 2-week suspension amounted to nothing more than a slap on the wrist, while others said it was overly harsh to silence a TV commentator who is literally paid to give her view. For 2 weeks now, viewers have waited to see if the suspension would make a difference. Would she remain an outspoken, boundary-pushing comedian who doesn't shy away from giving her opinion? Or would she reinvent herself as a thoughtful commentator who knows when to toe the line? And the answer is, I don't know. Because despite The View's mission to dig deep and discuss the day's issues, Whoopi's suspension really didn't come up today. Instead, Whoopi just talked about the show itself.
There's something kind of marvelous about being on a show like this, because we are The View, and this is what we do. And sometimes we don't do it as elegantly as we could. And sometimes, well, yeah, you know, but it's 5 minutes to get in important information about topics. Yeah. And that's what we try to do every day. And I want to thank everybody who reached out while I was away.
I don't know if that's Stockholm Syndrome or what, but instead of the resolution that ABC may have been hoping for, we're left with even more questions. What did Whoopi do during her time off? Did she seek out other voices? Has she changed her mind about things? What about the elephant in the room? Is everything exactly the same as it was before she was punished? I want to bring in Maureen Callahan. She's a writer and editor and critic at large with the New York Post. Mike Paul is the president of the Reputation Doctor PR agency. And Stan Zimmerman is a writer and producer who's worked on The Golden Girls, Roseanne, and Gilmore Girls as well. Welcome to all three of you. So, Maureen, I'm going to start with you. And first of all, I shake in my boots at the fact that you're on my show because I'm always terrified that I may one day end up in your column. So let's just call this a truce so that we can interview. And please, 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 I hope it goes well. So, okay, Maureen, The View is all about the news, right? They take on big news topics and then they chew on them. And I think the biggest news of the day, specifically for The View, was what happened on The View. She came back and they didn't chew. What'd you make of that?
You know, I thought it was very typically Whoopi. I remember watching that segment in question when she asserted that the Holocaust was not about race. And all of her other co-hosts tried to get her to walk that back and to interject and to say, no, 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 Whoopi. And she wasn't having it. And I think really what we're seeing here is the sort of the bubble of privilege that she's lived in. You know, she's been famous for most of her adult life. She doesn't really hear the word no. She doesn't really understand that she's in the wrong. She went on Colbert the next night and doubled down, saying that, you know, it was white-on-white violence. And because of that, the Nazis really had to do the work in order to find the Jews they wanted to exterminate. I mean, she just sort of kept putting her foot in her mouth. So I was not surprised at all to see her return today and sort of soft pedal and continue to, you know, evade an actual apology.
I was like looking at it like a tennis match, waiting, like, when are they going to talk about this? Like, that's what I came for. And, it, you know, on the show went. So, Stan, let me ask you this. When Whoopi was suspended, the president of ABC, Kim Godwin, said this, and I'll read her words specifically. While Whoopi has apologized, I've asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments. And today, you know, Whoopi said she spent time listening, but we're not so sure about the learning part. And I wondered if you thought that it's unsatisfying if the learning part isn't public, or if they were right to just go about their business and move on.
Well, I think the learning part was already there the next day after she made those comments. She had somebody from the Anti-Defamation League. She talked about what she had learned and she wanted to learn more. I have a different point of view of this, in that I don't think we should have put her in timeout, as Kim Godwin, I guess she was taking her last name literally. Give her time on the air to talk about it. Today was about coming back and saying where she was. Hopefully there'll be many discussions on the show about this topic, because as a Jew, it is a very important topic. And what is race? I'm not a practicing Jew, but I still feel Jewish. So I think this is something that can't be done in 2 or 3 minutes on one show, and especially not the first day she's back.
Well, I mean, I encourage everyone to Google what is race, because I learned a few things, you know, from when I was in high school, when I was told there were only 3. And then I learned how it is really morphed by social science all around the world, to the point where it's almost indiscernible how many races there are, depending on who you talk to. So, you know, I got a learning moment out of Whoopi's business.
And that was
so,
where she was talking from her point of view, literally her view, in her shoes at that moment. And that's all we can expect. I had a lot of people say she should know better. Well, you learn when you learn. And I think she's learning right now. We're watching it. Don't we want people to learn and change in front of us?
Yeah, well, there's Mike Paul clapping, because, Mike, I had a feeling you were going to say, it's called The View. So if you're not free to express views, or for fear of, or trepidation of tripping on you know, tripwires, the show's going to stink. But reputation-wise, ABC had a tough, you know, they found themselves as a sticky wicket. What would you have advised ABC to do, Mike?
Well, first of all, I agree with Stan. The apology was 2 weeks ago. This was a time of punishment, and she came back from her time of punishment, whether she liked it or not, by her bosses. I give her an A+ for how she's handled it to date. There are many that believe that she shouldn't have had to have 2 weeks off at all. As you say, the name of the program is The View. This is more about heart work than head work. And the beautiful thing that she did, and why I give her an A+, is that she not only apologized, she not only took the time to learn herself, she used her platform to educate so many more people. That's critical. Most people in these situations, especially anchors, and Ashley, you and I know many anchors who have gotten into trouble over the years, usually do not have bosses nor themselves comfortable to continue the conversation. They want it to go away as quickly as possible. I give ABC kudos for at least using the platform to educate people, and here's the education moment. The Aryan race, Nazis, decided after 6 million, sadly, Jewish people died. Their message was, we are a superior race. We are the Aryan race. We will test blood even to see, almost like a one-drop rule, like black folks here in the United States know so well, to find out if you're Jewish. You are lesser than us. You are below us. We made it race. And it was important for Whoopi to understand not just blacks and Latinos and others of color, but to understand that message. And she was patient enough and humble enough to allow Jewish leaders to have that education moment for herself, and then she shared it with the world. Kudos for her for doing so.
I wish you'd been on. I wish you'd been on the show to say exactly that. And Maureen, I think this is where I sort of came up flat today, because again, if it's a teachable moment, a learning moment, it felt very much today as if it were a, oh, let's make this go away moment. And that wasn't the way, you know, it was, you know, described back when it happened. So I'm still trying to figure out if it was punishment or if it was ABC worried about having to do something, anything, so why don't we just do this?
Yes, and, you know, just to quickly piggyback on that last thought, you know, yes, the show is called The View, but to quote the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, you may be entitled to your opinion, but you are not entitled to the facts. The other thing I want to say is Whoopi has said many, many offensive things in the past. She's defended Mel Gibson. She has said Roman Polanski wasn't guilty of rape. She defended Michael Vick. So, you know, this is all part of sort of the traveling carnival that is The View. They are not a panel full of academics or historians or journalists. They're actors, and they're really kind of show people.
Yeah, speaking of show people, this is what people were treated to when they, you know, showed up at The View today to hear sort of how it was going to go. And this is what Whoopi had to say. Take a look.
We're going to keep having tough conversations.
Yeah.
And in part because this is what we've been hired to do. And it's not always pretty, as I said, and it's not always as other people would like to hear. But it is an honor to sit at this table and be able to have these conversations because they're important. They're important to us as a nation and to us more so as a human entity.
So I don't get it. I mean, tough conversations are tough conversations, Stan. And I'm going to get to you in a second, Mike, but Stan, just weigh in on this part, because I'm not so sure anyone's going to feel comfortable having a tough conversation, especially if you're a really high-paid host or if you're a guest that wants to keep coming back on The View.
Well, that was my point. She should not have been punished. She should have stayed there and kept having the tough conversations. But we're living in a world now where you can't talk about race in schools. There's currently laws happening in Florida where you can't talk about being gay. And if we don't talk about it, there's going to be continued stigma and continued suicide. And I'm a big proponent of having, like she said, having those messy conversations. And I think today was one step towards it, which she'll have many more hopefully on the show.
Yeah, Mike, you were going to say something.
Well, first of all, that was only 2 minutes of a show that's obviously longer than 2 minutes, number one. And number two, we have to be, I see it totally differently. This is also a business. That was a message from her bosses. That was also a message for sponsors. That was a safe message. It was a message that said, we're going to remind the public what the show is in the first place. And that's all it was. And then they went back into their views. They didn't do that for the entirety of the show. Sorry to disappoint everybody. The apology was 2 weeks ago. Today was about getting back to business, and the bosses had a strong message of this is why this show exists. This is who we are. And then they went into their various views after that. That's
But
all.
what is it saying to other people that come on and say, I've learned, I apologize? Why do you punish people after they've already admitted and went to someone from the Jewish Defense League? So that's what
I'll answer that. It's not just about Whoopi. As I said, it's a TV show. It makes money. It has sponsors. Let's also talk about the 800-pound gorilla that's in the room. There is a large portion of the news community and the Hollywood community that is Jewish. They're powerful. They're good people. They're a part of the show as well. They understand their audience. It was a powerful message that needed to happen. And there was a business message that happened today. They wanted to be more safe after going through a crisis. And today was about a message from bosses and sponsors for at least the first 2 minutes of the program, and they wanted to move on. That's my translation of what happened.
And Maureen, I'd love you to weigh in on this, because us folk in the media business, we all gossip about what's going on, and when the what hits the fan, we talk even more. And say what you will about Roger Ailes, but the one thing that he used to do, he would double down, and he would always back his guys, and he would say, throw down, double down, just work it, because it's fomenting lots of discussion out there. And I'm wondering, Maureen, if you're going to watch that show with more of an eagle eye, saying, look, you weren't doing so well. The numbers haven't been great on The View. You're hemorrhaging people and trying to fill co-host spots, etc. This could have been a business decision where you actually did go all the way on this discussion and this debate and this controversy and go on cancel culture and all the rest. Instead, you decided to play it safe. And a show like The View, I don't know, call me crazy, but I don't think it should be safe.
Well, it's also
I agree.
owned by
Listen,
Disney.
I think that ABC was riding a line here. I mean, we are sort of grappling with what cancel culture is and whether it should even exist. And if we aren't going to cancel somebody, but should there be some sort of retribution? The ABC clearly had to show they took this very, very seriously. Whoopi was not pleased that she was suspended. Her co-hosts were not pleased that she was suspended. But here's the thing. The View has always been about the headlines the women at the table make. It's never really the substance of any conversation. It's always been about the infighting. It's always been about what's going on behind the scenes, who's leaking what to Page Six, power plays, or faux pas, such as, rape. So, in the end, this will just be yet another controversy that does go away. But it's all very much in keeping with what The View is really best known for.
Yeah,
I'm interested,
Stan.
I hope it doesn't go away. I hope we learn. I literally went online and Googled blacks and the Holocaust. As someone that was bar mitzvahed, I didn't know anything about it. So I think, just the fact that we're having this discussion has opened up a new world for people. And I hope we keep talking.
And the fact that you wrote, Stan, the fact that you wrote for Roseanne brings a whole other aspect into this discussion, and that was Roseanne said something that was beyond the pale, and that was it. She got career suicide. Roseanne was gone, not the show Roseanne, just the Roseanne part of it. Some people weigh in saying, well, when you're conservative, you really get hit harder. But then others will point to Senator Al Franken and say, are you kidding me? But I mean, you're the closest to this. I mean, you wrote for Roseanne. How do you feel about that?
I think it's different with Roseanne. I think she was making a joke and then she didn't own it. And that was my viewpoint at the time. Right. And I said, why can't she take this as a teachable moment? And if she didn't know Valerie Jarrett was black, so now she does. And why, if it's offensive to somebody, why can't we be sensitive, even if it wasn't sensitive to her? So again, it's grabbing those moments, because otherwise we're pushing it down the road, kicking the can, and we're going to keep talking about racism and anti-Semitism, and even going back to, I wrote on the Golden Girls. Why were the Golden Girls Italian and not Jewish? Sophia Petrillo. Because the writers were afraid of making those characters Jewish. So we're still, 35 years later on the same topic.
Yeah. Mike, one last comment, because I could see you wanted to jump in there.
Well, I love what he had to say about Roseanne, and I'm sure he would agree, eagle before the fall. Again, I give Whoopi an A+ for how she handled it. Whether her bosses were guiding her or not, she had to own it in the end. And she was humble about it in the end. She made it a teachable moment, not only for herself, but for all. And kudos for her for doing so.
And she didn't blame Ambien.
That's right.
Good one. Hey, all three of you, great conversation. Thank you for that. And look, we all got through it. And I suspect that, Maureen, we're not going to end up in your column tomorrow. We're all okay? Clean? Whoosh, we made it?
Oh, Ashley, thank you so much for having me. Never.
I love reading your work. I'm going to tell you, it's almost like sport. Maureen Callahan, Mike Paul,
Thank you
and
so
Stan
much.
Zimmerman. Thank you. Thank you all three.
Thank
and
you.
I'm going to have you all three back real soon. Appreciate you coming.